This crowd rises to its feet. Vaccaro slammed it home. Garland left wing, free ball. Perfect! Garland front of the lane, lob to Mobley. Pow! And Allen blocked the shot at the rim. Pow! With the left hand and a foul.
Welcome to the Chase Down Podcast, part of the Cavs Media family. I'm your host, Justin Roan. The Chase Down is presented by Fubo TV. Watch over 100 channels of live sports and TV for half the cost of cable. There's no contract and no commitment. Try for free at FuboTV.com. The Cleveland Cavaliers dropped a disappointing one in Salt Lake City. Donovan Mitchell's return to his former team. Really frustrating game. Not a lot of fun to see them lose in that way. But joining me to talk about that game and look ahead to the rest of the road trip is my co-host, Carter Rodriguez. Carter, how you doing, buddy?
I'm doing good, man. I got all my grump out last night. Just a really brutal way to lose a game. I thought they completely dominated that fourth quarter. So to lose when you had the game under such control, it's just one of those painful ones, especially one that you really want to win for, for momentum purposes, for Donnie homecoming purposes, for a lot of reasons, and they didn't win. And, I'm sure we're going to talk about why. But ultimately, I think the Cavs had that game in their hands and they let it go.
Yeah, I mean, it is really disappointing to see that result. I agree with your assessment. I thought they really took control of the fourth quarter. The Jazz shot just 5 of 25 in the fourth quarter and still won. I tweeted as it was happening that the Cavs actually do have the best net rating in the NBA when it comes to fourth quarters. And funny enough, they did end up winning the fourth quarter with that late Donovan Mitchell 3. But yeah, it was one of those that just kind of slipped away. I thought Evan Mobley, Darius Garland, and obviously Donovan Mitchell played about as well as you could reasonably expect. I thought Mobley was flat out dominant in the fourth quarter. That was one of the best defensive games I've seen from him in a long time. Garland, you could tell, it's probably at this point we're getting a feel for what we can expect with Garland as he's wearing this brace. Looked better last game against Phoenix. Touch was a little bit off against Utah, but I thought overall he was helpful. And Mitchell was just on an absolute mission, but they just didn't get a lot from the remainder of the supporting cast. And obviously the Karis LeVert mishaps late in the game ended up being incredibly costly.
Yeah, and we have to talk about this in part, and I'm probably going to be clearing my throat a lot tonight, gang. My voice is still shot from this cold.
We're just all happy that you're here. We're
thanks,
worried
brother.
about you after last podcast. I'm talking on behalf of all the listeners because I'm in touch with what they're feeling.
God, I know you are, buddy. I knew we would have to talk about Karis, and you didn't see a lot of ref complaints out of me last night because I thought this was emblematic of, and maybe I'm being a little harder on Karis because I know this is a thing that drives me crazy historically with him, which is I thought he was terrible on his closeouts last night. I thought he was off balance. I thought he put himself in a position to get called fouls. Could the refs have called it differently? Sure. Did Clarkson move forward a little bit on that jumper? Yes. But as our boy Ziggy was on Twitter saying, as he's rising, Karis is on the free throw line. You're not contesting that shot. You're just not. In a meaningful way. And being smart and keeping yourself out of situations where you can get kind of, put yourself in a bad spot and in a vulnerable spot. The reality is, ever since the Zaza Kawhi incident, if you undercut a 3-point shooter, you're going to get called. Every single one I see is a flagrant. So the second I saw it, I was like, it's a flagrant. I was hoping against hope it wouldn't be, but sure. And then to get behind him and then be, again, not in particularly good control on the second foul to the point where you could draw another one. I think Karis has to take a little responsibility there. It's endemic of an issue I've had with him on the defensive end in the past. So, Am I I was much grumpier last night. I'm fine with it today. I get it. Super hard to play defense against a hot shooter like that. I think if Okoro had not been under the weather, maybe you see him on Clarkson and instead of Karis. So it's a tough
honestly,
guard for him, but like he got, I don't think this was a situation where I left the game going, man, those refs just really screwed us. I think we put ourselves in a dangerous spot.
No, there was far like there were so many things that you could point to beyond those calls, right? Like they gave that game away. You know how I like to always revisit the Kyrie Irving trade, and I will branch out every single tentacle of that trade and add to it to add the context to the trade. We can do the same thing for the Donovan Mitchell trade and add this win to the Jazz because the Cavs gifted them this one. I will add, Carter, like my frustration with it in the moment, and I did see there was a tweet, a graph that was put out today that said that Cavs fans rank third in the NBA for complaining about refs. So anytime you can see your hard work get acknowledged, it's always refreshing and appreciated. So hat tip to whoever put that graph out there. My gripe with it was that Karras, on the one that was called a flagrant, was that he turned his feet the other way and he wasn't taking away the landing space. And you're right that Everson Zaza, that usually gets called. But my gripe is that it wasn't called when Karras was fouled by Jordan Clarkson on the exact same type of move where Clarkson took away his landing space on an and 1-3. I think it should have been called a foul at that point. I get that. The flagrant to give them the possession and then for Clarkson to jump backwards into the three, it was annoying at the time, but by no means is that why they lost. And so many of my gripes in the game ended up getting answered after the game because, like you, I was thinking, man, it'd be great to have Okoro out there. Like the Cavs obviously shut the Jazz's water off. They shot only 20% in the fourth quarter, but Isaac Okoro being able to really kind of take away what Jordan Clarkson is doing. And I guess with the way that defense is allowed to play with the current rules, the only way that you can really defend a three-point shot by Clarkson is if you're in position initially, right? Because then if he's jumping into you and he's kicking his legs out, that's going to be deemed an offensive foul. Whereas if you're Karras and you're making up ground, that's where you're going to get into trouble. So I understand that. I understand the application of the rule. It's just the inconsistency when it wasn't called on the other end, and the fact that, hey, his feet were at the free throw arc rather than the 3-point arc, turned the other way, and it was still deemed as taking away the landing space. To me, that seemed a little bit ridiculous, but we probably should have mentioned it at the top. Isaac Okoro, JB Bickerstaff clarified that both Jared Allen and Isaac Okoro were throwing up before and during the game, dealing with, I guess, a little bit of food poisoning. Guess they got a pizza recommendation from Michael Jordan, but that like explained a lot of kind of the situational gripes that I had, because I would have liked to have seen Isaac play more in this game because I thought his first initial shift was very good.
Yeah, it turns out it's hard to play if you're puking. So there's a degree of like the issues I did have earlier were pretty easily answered. When you're down your starting center and you're starting small forward, yeah, Karras might play 15 minutes in a row, especially on a night where it was I would call it bad Jetty night, where he just didn't have it. It was very clear. Everything was awkward. Everything was when he did do kind of his chaos plays, they were chaos the wrong way. And so Jetty wasn't there. I thought Lamar had a really nice game guarding Lowry Markkanen.
Yep.
And, it's a spot where when, we've talked about it plenty of times, but when you're down, in this instance, 3 rotation players and Dean, Jarrett, and mostly Isaac, your other role players, the burden on them to have a good game gets really, really high. And Kevin Love had a pretty awful offensive game. He missed 4 wide open threes. I think he's like 1 for his last 16. He's slumping right now. Jetty was bad. Okoro or Neto, he was fine, but he didn't. He certainly didn't.
It wasn't the same spark that you got in the
he didn't
previous
flip the game. So when that happens, it's just really hard to win a game. And they were gonna win. That's the thing. They were gonna win until a freak couple mistakes / calls that maybe didn't go their way. Combined, like it was a little bit of a perfect storm. Like maybe Karras doesn't get called for all of those, and they don't mess up the out of bounds call prior to the play. But like,
yeah, that was part of it too. Was
Yeah.
I did see it pointed out that some people said that Lamar kind of signaled that he did touch it, but in real time, especially because there wasn't a replay, I thought that the Clarkson shot just went out of bounds, and that whole possession should never have occurred. The 7-point possession, and I felt bad for Karras too, because I thought he was actually having a pretty good game offensively. Like he was reasonably efficient on a night where the Cavs couldn't get a lot of things going. Salt Lake City is historically a tough place to play for the Cavs. It's always part of a road trip. You're dealing with the elevation, similar situation to Denver. You kind of expect to shoot a little bit worse in those games, but yeah, they just missed a lot of momentum threes. I remember there was a time in the third quarter, I believe they were up 1, and they had a clean look at a three that they missed. Garland missed one in transition. As you mentioned, Kevin Love missed a bunch of threes. But I think you were correct to highlight Lamar, because when we are talking about, as this team gets healthy, what kind of role do we envision for everybody? This is the exact kind of spot where I really like getting Lamar minutes. It's as a small ball 4. I thought he was very good on Lauri Markkanen. When he's playing that position, I think it's easier to get him kind of those rim running looks and the possessions where everyone else is being accounted for, and you can find him cutting to the basket, or I believe he got a couple passes in the dunker spot as well. This is a role that I love for Lamar, and I think on nights when Kevin Love doesn't have it, or maybe you're playing a team that is playing 5 out, which challenges Love defensively when he has to play in space, I like playing Lamar in those spots. I think Dean Wade is another player that can really work in those spots, and unfortunately, when you're down Jared Allen, we're kind of stuck in situations where Kevin Love had to play the 5 defensively, which is a really tough ask.
Yeah, sorry. And it's one of those things where he just didn't really have the mobility. I thought he actually played okay defensively, but there's just a limit to what he can do protecting the rim. I thought Jared did a nice job. I think his lack of shooting gravity, is much more easily hidden when he's only playing next to one big as opposed to 2. And this was really what we thought he was going to be. Like this Lamar as perimeter player thing. Kind of sprung up out of nowhere. We all thought, okay, small ball, high energy 4 that can run and be switchy, and all the perimeter stuff has been really a byproduct of need rather than I think what has ever been ideal for him. So I was I feel like Lamar has had some rough social media games where people are being pretty hard on him, and I think it's watching him in this role, it's really a good byproduct of like, hey, this guy's pretty useful when he's put in the right box, and when JB is allowed to put him in the right box, which is just as important, because circumstance determines as much as anything.
Yeah, availability is such a big factor. And I mean, as frustrating as it is to see Kevin Love go through this offensive spell, I don't think it's fair to put the loss solely on him either, because the Cavs were +4 in his minutes, right? Like, it's not like they were outscored by some unreasonable margin with him on the court and then they had to make up for it. So I think it's too easy sometimes to label these guys as scapegoats and point the finger at them. I thought collectively they could have been better.
But they should have won the game. I mean, again, like, that's the thing. Like, they should have won the game, and like if that freak occurrence doesn't happen, they were well on their way to doing so. So it's like, it's too hard. I'm not super worried about like pointing fingers on a night like that, where it's like, hey, if you didn't make a couple enormous mistakes to close the game, you're walking away with a win and feeling a lot different.
Yeah, but I think it also comes back to what you highlighted in the last podcast, which was the Cavs need to be more consistent. They need to play a complete game. And you look at it, the 2 quarters you highlighted when you were talking about that, first and third quarter, those were the quarters that the Cavs lost by a combined 11 points, and then they had to make up for it. Like, if you play a more consistent game and maintain that focus, you're not going to put yourself in a position where you are susceptible to a call going your way or not going your way, right? Like, it's hard to even complain about the Levert calls when we had 2 games last week where the last 2-minute report said that the Cavs basically should have lost to the Bulls both times, right? Like, you're going to have games that you win in those spots. You're going to have games that you lose. But if you play a more consistent game, if you take care of business, you're going to put yourself in a position where you're not vulnerable to that. And I think that's one of the bigger takeaways. It's easy to say that now when you start the game and two of the guys that you start the game with and you anticipate playing a bunch are not available to you. So certainly a weird circumstance there, but I do think there's enough of a sample size this season of the Cavs not putting 48 minutes together that it's at least worth noting.
Yeah, absolutely it is. I mean, it's a young team, and it's, you're not, I mean, if they did consistently put fourth quarters together, or all four quarters together, sorry, they would be the best team in the league. That's every team has a weakness. Every team has, a bugaboo that keeps them from winning every single night when you're more talented than your opposition, which most games, I think you could say that applies to the Cavs.
Yeah, and it's a common trait with young teams, right?
Yeah.
Like inconsistency is the whole thing. That's why you and I don't put them yet in the contending tier, even though all the numbers say that this is a contending caliber team, which I do believe that they have the talent to contend. It's inconsistency. The level of consistency that you have to play with to win an NBA championship is higher than most young teams display. There's always the growing pains. So that's going to manifest in the regular season, but it's worth highlighting, at least when you're talking about games like this, that you could avoid these situations by giving more consistent effort throughout the course of the game.
Yeah, but let's stop talking about not fun stuff and talk about Evan Mobley's defense in the fourth quarter. Justin, he had 4 blocks in the fourth, just completely shut the Jazz's water off multiple times. Made poor Walker Kessler Edwards, whatever the hell his name is, have a really rough game from the field. I just was so impressed by him. I think it was probably his most complete quarter as a defender, especially without Jared out there, that we've seen thus far in his career.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the really impressive things I think that we've seen now a couple times with Mobley. When Jarrett missed some time earlier in the year, the defense actually improved, which wasn't the case last season, especially when you don't have Dean Wade as well, who is kind of another big that can play a lot of different positions defensively and fulfill a lot of roles. Evan, I feel, has really elevated his game on the defensive end, especially when he is playing as a center. And that's really important. And I thought the composure he showed in this game, he picked up some early fouls as well. I believe he fouled Lowry on a 3 that he would have liked to have back and a couple other ones, but he didn't let that deter him from still playing aggressive defense and going after these blocks instead of, I got to be careful because Jarrett's out and I don't have the same kind of rope that I would have if we had him as an option to go to. He was really assertive on the defensive end, and frankly, I think he changed the game. Like, you talk about the 5 of 25 the Jazz shot in the fourth quarter. That was a direct result, in my opinion, of the defense Evan Mobley was playing at the rim, and he got them back in this game, and he got them into position to win. They just didn't bring it home.
Yeah, I would agree. I thought that fourth quarter was Evans on the defensive end, and obviously Donnie's on the offensive end. But yeah, it was a really exciting. I don't know if Evans taken over a game that thoroughly yet this season for any stretch. Really, I mean, Jazz were scoring at will through the majority of that game, and up till the last 2 minutes, it was going great. But such is life. How about a Cleveland Cavalier taking 18 threes in a game? Has anyone ever done that? Have we ever checked that stat?
I haven't. I assume at some point JR has. Maybe CJ Miles. I know CJ Miles had the 3-point record prior to the return of LeBron. So maybe one of those guys had it. But that's a great point. Like, it's nice to have a Cavalier that's that assertive from the 3-point line. I mean, having Donnie and Darius when he's healthy and his hand is feeling right, just the volume that they put up is more than we'd see on a nightly basis for the Cavs a couple years ago.
Yeah, I mean, 18 threes is bananas, and I mean, obviously, he only went 7 of 18, which is perfectly good percentage. But even inside the arc, he went 7 of 9 from 2-point range, just completely destroying them on all of his rim attacks, getting clean looks, killing them from floater range. I thought
Probably didn't help that Walker Kessler was calling out the defensive schemes, which led to one of my favorite tweets highlighting Donnie talking to him after the game, saying, "Hey, when you're calling out what the defense is doing, like don't say exactly what it is, because you're kind of giving me the answers to the test." Good old Donnie, still coaching and being that good vet to his former team.
Respectfully, Donnie, don't do that in the playoffs. I mean, but it is hilarious, because you come from a college environment where you do probably just holler that stuff out because they're not good enough to kill you. But Donovan Mitchell is.
I mean, Donnie grew up a LeBron fan, was a big Cavs fan through that run. And one of the things that we saw in the playoffs, especially against Toronto, was LeBron knowing exactly what the Raptors were running at every time and calling it out and frustrating them. So that's just that next level of IQ right there.
Yeah, he was awesome in this game. I'm sad that they weren't able to win it for him, because he, it just feels like he's the kind of guy who comes and rises to these moments, and not in a way that is annoying either. Like I feel like at the beginning of the season, I might have suggested that the first game in Utah would be a little irritating, where Donnie would be forcing things and gunning, even if it, taking some bad shots. I don't really think he did that. I thought he attacked. He created weaknesses in the defense and exploited them, which is exactly what you want, an apex offensive creator to do. And the fact that, again, he just continues to play, it's funny to say play within himself on a night where he took 18 threes. Maybe it's not the right terminology, but
it felt that way, right?
But it did feel that way.
Thing. So, I mean, Donnie took over that game the same way that Zoom took over the world of video conferencing. Support for this podcast and the following message comes from Zoom. 500,000 businesses connect using Zoom, a single platform for phone, chat, workspaces, events, apps, and video. Zoom enables real-time collaboration for teams around the globe. Zoom, how the world connects. Carter, we buried a lead. We absolutely buried a lead on this podcast.
I think we got there right on time. I wanted to talk about the game and get that out of the way before we got to the really fun stuff.
Yeah, it's like the happiness sandwich. Start off happy intro, talk about the game that was not as fun, and now we get to some fun, which is the report that Ricky Rubio is nearing a return. Adrian Wojnarowski broke the story. Multiple other outlets have kind of confirmed it, that Ricky Rubio is getting near a return.
Listed as questionable on the official NBA report as of Wednesday night.
Yeah, so it's going to be a matter of how he feels after the practice today, as we're recording this on Wednesday. Obviously, how he goes through warm-ups, but at the very least, we know that it is coming soon. Hopefully it will be against the Portland Trail Blazers, but obviously the Cavs will be responsible with Ricky Rubio's return. But man, this washed a lot of the poor taste out of my mouth, because at the end of the day, lost to the Jazz. It's one of 82. They've beat some good teams. It's frustrating. It happens. They gave that one away. But Ricky Rubio returning and this team getting healthy, that's the type of stuff that really kind of matters to the long term of this team. And you and I have talked about this a million times, but what Ricky meant to the Cavs last season and just his presence on the court, that was one of my favorite surprises of last year. And he quickly became one of my favorite members of the team. So I could not be happier to hear that his return is coming soon.
Yeah, distilled basketball joy, Ricky Rubio. Just a true savant. I feel like the Cavs really empowered him to be him in a way that, other teammates haven't, or other teams he's played for haven't done, where there's a lot of, focus on his shortcomings, whereas the Cavs kind of encouraged him to play through those, they encouraged him to shoot threes, both off the bounce and off the catch. And he rewarded them with some insane games, some insane on-court leadership, some insane off-court leadership. A lot of time, they signed, or they traded for him, and I think there were a lot of eyebrows raised last year because obviously no one knew what was to come with this team, and they
were moving on from one of the few kind of 3-and-D wings that they had in Taurean Prince.
Absolutely, and I think that I'm about as fond of Ricky as a Cavalier I think he has surpassed Baron Davis on a list of Cavaliers who, how much I love them, that have played less than 30 games with the franchise.
The per game love numbers are off the chart.
Off the charts. So it just feels, right to get him back. I'm super interested, obviously, to see how he looks. It's often kind of considered a 2-year injury. Even if you can come back after one, you're not all the way right for a year after. He has already torn this ACL, so you have to factor that in as well. But the nice thing here is like they're already pretty functional without him at the backup point guard spot because it's just Donovan Mitchell. And again, I just think it's more. I keep hammering this, but it's just more stuff in the tool belt for JB. It's a player that you can throw in there if the team starts to kind of lose their cool, and he can kind of help calm them down. And if he gets to last season's heights, then we got a stew going, my friend.
I mean, I'm the optimist. I don't know if we'll see last season's heights with Ricky this year. Just with him coming off the Olympics, where he was playing some of the best basketball of his career, and then continuing that on with the Cavs. I think it was just at like a level of conditioning and just reps that had him playing at such a high level. But it was funny looking at the Jazz game. There was a time where JB was going Raul, Darius, and Donnie all together, and I was like, that's the Ricky lineup right there. Like, people forget, like when people talked about how the Cavs would close games with Ricky last year, a lot of those games were with Darius and Colin as well, right? Like, it was the 3-guard lineup, just giving the Cavs that little bit of extra juice. And I thought the movement that they were able to generate with the 3-guard look helped make up for some of the spacing concerns and really play with pace. So it wouldn't be surprising to me to see that. But at the end of the day, like, even if Ricky isn't giving the exact same level that he was at last year, I just think that he brings a level of composure and experience that's really going to elevate the team. He's going to make things easier for Darius. He's going to make things easier for Donovan. He's going to help push the pace. Like, I don't know if I've got to this take yet. I think we've talked about it off the podcast a couple times, but throughout the staggering of a game, I really want to see Isaac play more with Darius, and Ricky is another guy that I'd like to see him play with more, because those guys kind of understand how to utilize his off-ball movement, and I think he's gone better off-ball than he was last year. I think you've seen, especially in these last couple of weeks, Isaac really being active in finding those passing lanes off-ball and getting into situations where you can get him for an easy look. And I think Ricky and Darius are the 2 guards that are most capable of finding him. I think Donnie, a lot of his passing skills, he's improved in the pick and roll this year, obviously, but I think a lot of it is kind of kickouts to shooters because that's what he's played with more. Whereas the Cavs have kind of got creative and funky with limited spacing and using a lot of cuts and off-ball action. So I think having Ricky is going to make life easier for the guards, obviously, but I think he's going to make it easier for the guys that cut to the basket, like Isaac, like Lamar, or even Jared and Evan.
I have an unfounded suspicion that the 3-point numbers are going to get better after Ricky comes. Couple things. There's the obvious.
As a team, you mean?
As a team, yes.
Okay.
There's the obvious stuff, aka he never ever misses a shooter's pocket on a kick out, and I really think that's something more casual fans don't notice. Look at how players shoot when they get a clean pass versus a pass that they have to bring back across their body before they rise, or that they have to lean down because it's near their knees,
or reach up and grab it, bring it back to the pocket, then shoot.
Yeah, I'm sure someone has the numbers somewhere, but like that is a meaningful percentage changer, as opposed to you catch the ball in the pocket and can immediately rise up like you're grabbing off a rack almost, or just getting a clean chest pass in practice. So he'll do that. I also think, I don't have the numbers in front of me. I feel like he had better gravity than even his percentages showed last year because of his willingness to shoot. The fact that he was taking 5-6 threes in games from time to time, both as a pull-up and as a catch-and-shoot shooter. So I think those 2 things, a little extra gravity as compared to, someone like Isaac who has, very, very little right now, even if the percentages aren't super different, I think we're going to see this team's 3-point numbers kind of bump back up upon Ricky Rubio's return, which is, I don't think what most people would expect, but it's something I'm looking forward to seeing.
Yeah, I think the frequency is going to go up. It wouldn't surprise me to see the percentages go up. Like that was a big part of the Jazz loss as well, right? Was just the percentages they shot from three, and I don't know how much of that's elevation, how much of that's just, you know, a little bit of bad shooting luck or whatever the case may be. But I think it's a really good thing to highlight of how he is one of those guys that can find shooters in the pocket, get them the ball in ways that they're comfortable with. I mean, that's one of the great skills that LeBron had, right? Was that it's not just that he would be able to get the ball to a shooter, it's that he would get the ball to the shooter in the pocket to give them a clean shot, or they could go up with a shot right away, right? And that extra second is what makes the difference in terms of spacing, because most teams you're going to have a guy flying out at you. It could be the difference between a 3-point shot going up and a defender's closing out, so I have to kind of drive around him or give up the ball and relocate. So I think even the fact that you're going to get cleaner looks is going to help increase the pace. The fact that he's going to be looking to headman the ball is going to increase the pace. We're probably going to have a few more turnovers too, because he's going to try some wild stuff. But if you're a team that passes the ball a bunch and is more of a ball movement team rather than an isolation one, turnovers are part of the equation, and it's certainly part of the equation with Ricky. Like, he threw some wild passes last year, but that's half of the fun. It's going to work out 70-80% of the time.
All genius has a little bit of a chaotic element, and you know I am predisposed to basketball.
Thank you, Carter. It's nice when you compliment me, but proceed.
You know I am predisposed towards basketball geniuses. Those are my favorite players to watch, even if their skill set or their physicality isn't necessarily as dominant, but the true savants that can just see the floor at an unbelievably high level, play that 3D chess, see the pass, a second before everyone else sees it. Ricky does that. The other place that he's, I think, going to help this team is point of attack defense. He's a big guard. He's strong. And I think he really, really meaningfully affected how opposing teams could run. And I'll tell you what, minutes that he shares with Donnie on the floor, watch your pockets, buddy, because those are two, high steal rate players on the defensive end, with a mess of limbs in the protecting the paint. I think it's going to be really, really hard to score on this Cavs team with Ricky out there, because he kind of leads the defense from the point of attack as well. And while the Cavs have a lot of strengths, and I think Darius has become a better and better defender, I think Donnie's given a good effort. There's still a difference between that and like what Neto's given them in his very short spurts. And if you're getting that for 15 minutes a game, which I think Ricky is very capable of, if his body's up to the challenge early on, then I think that's another major point of improvement.
And I think it's smart that you highlight the difference that strength makes, because Ricky and Darius, like, they're the same height, but even looking at Donovan, who's 6'2", 6'3", just how much stronger he is makes such a difference when you're talking about defense. Because I think Darius has got to the point where he stays connected to his guy a lot. Like, he's fighting through screens, he's staying on his guy, but there's still going to be spots where someone's just going to overpower him, right? Like, they're going to have a strength advantage, and it's really hard to move Donovan off his spots. It's hard to move Ricky off his spots, and that extra little bit of strength makes a big difference. I'm wondering how much speed he's going to have on the defensive end. Like, I'm not expecting elite point of attack defense that he brought last year, but that might be something that's going to take some time. But I think based on the sample size that we've seen from the Cavs this year of guys coming back from injury, guys getting rest at times, like, it really does feel like they haven't brought anybody back too soon.
Yeah, I mean, the guy's been cleared for 5-on-5 for about a month.
Right. And even when we were down in Cleveland in October, like, he was still sprinting like full court at that time, right? So I'm interested to see how he looks, but it's going to be one of those things where I don't think we're getting the same Ricky Rubio we had last year, but just that little bit of experience that he brings, and the basketball genius, as you say, I think that's really going to help this team. The other bit of I guess injury news.
Before you pivot, I have one last Ricky note that I wanted to throw out there is Chris Fedor reported, that he would likely be in the 12 to 15 minute range. And last year Rubio played just under 29 minutes a game while he was healthy. And so that's another thing that's really nice is, when they lost Ricky last year, it was pretty devastating. Obviously, they figured out a way to compete through it, and even had some of their best stretches of the season after he went down. But they really relied on him. They are in a spot where they are in a luxurious place at the backup point guard spot, where if he only has to give you 15 good minutes, which means he can change the way he's playing out there, knowing that it's going to be probably a shorter run. And on a night where he doesn't have it, you can just say, Donnie, you're the backup point guard again. For the second half or whatever it may be. So they have a lot more kind of wiggle room here. The last thing about Ricky coming back that I think is meaningful is if he is kind of able to get close to his performance last year, you are able to survive Darius twisting an ankle or Donnie, hurting a knee or something like that, where maybe they just need a week or two off to rest up. Being at the point where it's like, okay, we can play, we have a really capable third guard that can keep the train on the tracks, is really, really, really important. And again, this is coming from the president of the Howell Neto Appreciators Club. But Neto,
honestly, Neto's been so good that, like, if you need an emergency ball handler, I feel like I feel more confident in him as being that secondary ball handler than basically anything we had last season after Ricky went down.
Absolutely, he was. He has been. But Ricky, when he's right, is just another class of player, and it's quite. I just feel like Ricky is pure luxury for this team right now.
Yeah, I mean, last year he was a starting point guard playing as a backup, and this year I think you're right. Like, we don't need the Ricky Rubio that was there after Sexton went down. We need third guard Ricky Rubio, right? Like, what he was able to do to elevate his game and keep the Cavs afloat after Colin went down, that was next level stuff. But what we're going to ask from him is going to be less now. Evan's a more evolved player. Jarrett's improved. I think basically everyone around him has improved as well, and that includes Darius. And obviously Donovan Mitchell is an element you didn't have. So I think he's smart enough to know what is being asked of him and what the team needs, and I think he's going to play within that. So I'm pretty optimistic about what he's going to bring this year, and excited to see it, man. Like, it's going to take some time, but they have time, right? Like, they have the depth to allow him that time, and obviously that's been the case with taking their time bringing him back into the lineup. But the other bit of injury news we did get from Chris Fedor as well was that Dean Wade is unlikely to play on this road trip, but still making progress and coming back. Sounds like that shoulder was a real bother for him. So hopefully Dean will get back in the lineup soon, but that kind of makes me think, one, it's going to take some time for Dean, and this is probably going to be an extended opportunity for Isaac, assuming that he's over the food poisoning, to keep trying to earn that role and cement his spot in the starting lineup, because it's probably going to take Dean, even once he returns to the lineup, it's going to take time for him to probably be that 3-and-D threat that we expect him to be.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially coming off with a shoulder, with an injury on, his shooting side. The 3-and-D, the 3 part of the 3-and-D might take a minute anyway. When Dean is back, would you keep Isaac in the starting lineup at least for the first couple weeks?
Yeah, I think I would. I think you give it an extended run, just like they gave Karras an extended run, just like they gave Lamar an extended run. Like, especially because the lineup is still working and it's been in that positive. Just reward Isaac with that opportunity, and then bring Dean back at his own pace. And it's going to be the same thing as we always see, right? Like if Dean comes in and he's giving you great minutes off the bench, he might end up playing more minutes. So like it's going to be merit based, and that's kind of what I would expect from the team.
Yeah, I'm not sure. But that would just based on what the team has done in the past, and it's not like, I think if Dean was the entrenched starter after a full year of starting, maybe he slots right back in. But it's not like he started like 3 games. I mean, I don't actually know the number, but not that many games before
he's
he
only
got hurt.
Started as an injury replacement at this point, right?
Pretty much. So, I think that he has a chance to earn that spot, whether he earns it or Isaac loses it. But in the interim, I do think he'll probably come off the bench. And man, I'm just really eager to see him back, because he's really the last piece we're waiting on that we expect to be in the rotation. And I really do hope that we get to see him this month with at least a couple weeks of sample prior to the deadline, so Kobe can really laser focus in on what you need. Like if he's giving you awesome minutes, maybe you're more okay targeting someone who's a little smaller that serves a different need. I'm not sure, but like there's a lot of options that they have here, and narrowing down exactly what they need with if they do decide to make a move is going to be really, really important.
I will say you reminded me of something that I wasn't planning on talking about, but when it comes to kind of targeting someone on the perimeter, I think the unique thing about the Cavs, and the thing I feel good about, is we've seen a lot of different things work with this lineup, right? When you have Evan and Jared behind them, I kind of feel like the Cavs can employ the same strategy they had with the draft, which is best player available. Like if the best player available that fits a need comes in a 6'5" body, but is a volume movement shooter, you can go that route. If it's more of kind of a 4-3 like Lauri Markkanen was, you can still bring in that player with a degree of confidence that it's going to work. So I think they're in a situation where skill set matters more than archetype, and talent matters more. But at the end of the day, I just feel like they do have a little bit of flexibility with how they can approach this.
Here's the devil's advocate point, though, is that they have such great talent already. That talent might be able to cover up some archetypal misalignments. But then, the trade I've been talking about in our Discord and with friends recently has been the Channing Frye trade. The Channing Frye trade, where that was no one was like, oh, Channing Frye is awesome. He's languishing in Orlando. On a kind of a bloated contract. Everyone kind of forgot about him. But the second he got to Cleveland, everyone was like, oh, they didn't have that. and they needed that, and they have that now, and now they're freaking unbelievable. And part of me does wonder, the one thing this roster does not have right now, especially with Kevin Love having kind of an up and down year as a volume 3-point shooter, is that sharpshooter role player. They have Donnie and Darius, who are obviously sharpshooters in their own right, but they're also carrying a heavy on-ball load. And I saw someone tweeting about Darius Garland's finishing this year, and David Zabak, friend of the pod and our former Fear the Sword boss, was like, he's playing with.
That's certainly not listening to this podcast.
Yeah, and he never listens to this podcast. But he mentioned hey, Darius is often sharing the floor with 3 non-shooters. It's gonna be hard for him to score at the rim. Mm-hmm. And so the idea of them finding through some form or function a true 40% level volume 3-point shooter to pair with them in winning time, it just seems like I just can't help but wonder if it'll be a light switch moment where it's like, oh, that's what this team was missing. So that's my only devil's advocate for the archetypal argument, as opposed to just finding another good player.
Yeah, I guess that's on me. I don't think I communicated my point clearly enough, because what I was saying is that the skill set matters more than anything, and I think the skill set that the Cavs need is movement shooting. So
you're just saying don't worry about height.
Yeah, basically saying don't worry about height. I'm
not super worried about height. I'll tell you that much.
I'll find a picture of a player standing slightly ahead of someone else that is a different height, and I'll do my propaganda. I'll do my part on that. But like Lauri Markkanen, skill set, movement shooter. made a big difference, right? It worked great. So if the best movement shooter that you can acquire at the deadline, if you do in fact make a trade, is a larger player that's more of a 4-3, I think you can do that, right? Like I think you can go that route. If it's a 6-5 player that's going to get up 10 threes a game, that's going to I'm here for that as well, right? Like there's a lot of different ways that you can go.
And as always, the question is always going to be, what are you giving up? Because this is a team that,
and you can't just make a trade to make a trade, right? Like you have to kind of like the Cavs only
have a bigger plan in
options.
mind for sure.
Yeah, 100%.
So yeah, it's going to be really, really interesting to see kind of what they do. But to go back to my original point, that's why I want Dean back. Because I expect, even if the Cavs make a trade, I expect Dean to be a rotation player for them. And that means that they have some figuring to do. They gotta really kind of evaluate what they have and when they're fully healthy, and then what they actually need.
I'm fascinated to find out, because this is a question we've been asking, right? Like we talked about this in the past with JB of, okay, is it system or is it personnel, right? And I think we've seen as the personnel improves, the system improves, because, you have more options to work with. We still don't really have an answer for what type of rotation he would run if fully healthy, because we just have not experienced that. Like we didn't get a chance to see it last year. Even before Colin went down, you lost Dean and you lost Lowry and Kevin to COVID early in the year, and then Isaac got hurt, and then Colin got hurt, and then Darius got hurt, right? Like we just haven't seen what type of a rotation JB will use. I don't expect him to go 10 deep every single night, but again, this is the kind of data points that we just don't have, and I'm really curious to see what it looks like when this team is fully healthy.
Yeah, it's going to be a blast. But like they have, in the meantime, holding serve is going to be really important. They slipped to 5th in the East last night, which I think both of us kind of expected to happen over the course of this month. With so many other teams hot, they're catching a little break, I think, with Brooklyn, losing KD for a month in terms of the injury luck playing in their favor.
Yeah, but even then, Brooklyn has a very, very light schedule over the rest of January.
Of course, you've checked. By the way, I'm going to give you a little kudos. You've been all over the schedule stuff this year, not just with our team, but with the other teams we're playing, the other teams in the conference. I don't know how you're really. I've been impressed. You've taught me a lot rescheduling this year. But yeah, I mean, you're catching some minor breaks, but like we knew this was going to be the month where they probably lost a little ground. And February, March were going to be where they had to make it back. But if you win games you shouldn't win, or and you have less games like the one last night, where wins that you kind of give away, you gotta kind of steal them where you can, take advantage where you can. Like if they could win every single game the rest of this month, with the exception of the Milwaukee game, which is like the ultimate schedule loss. Like all of these games are winnable. Now they won't win every one. But if they're coming in, if they're winning 7 out of 10, 8 out of 10, then things look a lot different for them. But but like that's the kind of the challenge they have. They can't give up so much ground that a hot February and March don't get them back. Yeah,
I mean it's going to be interesting, because looking at the rest of this week, you play Portland, who is been slumping, but that. I mean, the other half of that equation is it's a team that's missed a ton of shots, so maybe they're due to start hitting shots, and we seem to be that team. And it's a team that's desperate. We've run into this situation many times. Like Toronto was playing for their season. We've played a lot of teams, even Chicago, like the fight that they've given. These are teams that like the whole blueprint is on the line. Portland went in on Jeremy Grant, who's an unrestricted free agent. Josh Hart has an option as well.
They fell to 11th in the West.
They need, that's a team that needs to show proof of concept to justify, hey, let's keep this together. Let's make something of this, right? And Dame's not going to run from the grind. So Portland's going to be desperate, and it's always hard to play when you're on an extended West Coast trip as well, right? So they got the Portland game, and then they play Minnesota, who's going to be third game in 4 nights. So Anthony Edwards left tonight's game with some hip tightness, so we'll see what his availability is. But I mean, we said coming into this, if the Cavs go 5-3, we're happy with it. How do you feel about the chances of going 5-3, Carter?
Well, it was the 5-3 over what stretch? I don't remember.
I think it was for this road trip. So basically, it was 3-2. Yeah, it was 3-2. Sorry, I got 5 stuck in my head. It was 3-2. We've got the 2 losses. Do you think we're going to get these wins?
Well, we should. Portland's not that good of a team right now. They've lost 8 of their last 10. Minnesota right now is down 15 to Detroit, and as you mentioned, their best wing player is banged up, and their best big is hurt. So these are 2 should wins, as far as I'm concerned. I know they're road games. I know it's a long road trip, but they're should wins. And these are the kind of games that if you want to be a top 3 seed, which I think is that is the golden ticket to me, being a 3 seed, because I would so much rather play, one of Indiana, Miami, or New York, even though Miami I know is on the come up right now. Mm-hmm. I would so much rather play one of them with home court than play Philly, Milwaukee, or Brooklyn in the 4-5. That is such a meaningful difference.
See, you're thinking of that from a podcast production standpoint, because if we play Philly, it's just not going to be a viable product that we're putting out. You're not even going to be able to allow me to talk. You're going to mute my mic. You're just going to go to town with your own takes while I just kind of stew and completely skew the numbers for the complaining about refs tweets.
Yes, that would be tough. But either way, I mean, you go from a series where you'll probably be favored in the first round with home court to a series you probably won't be favored. That's just, that's experience. That's uber star power, whether you're playing KD, Giannis, or Embiid. Those are 3 of the top, 5 MVP candidates right now. Somewhere in there.
Yeah.
So, I think the Cavs will have a puncher's chance, especially against Philly. It might be a close.
I think they'd be a slight favorite over Philly.
I do not think they would be a favorite over Philly.
Oh, I think they'd be a betting favorite, especially if they had a home court. I think they'd be a betting favorite.
With home court, maybe. But without it, no. I think that's one of those series that's pretty darn close by the odds makers. But either way, they will definitely be favored against the Indiana Pacers. I'll tell you that much, buddy. So, that's kind of my internal, it's not like the season's a failure if you can't get up to 3. These teams are so good at the top of the East. But that's what I'm really hoping to see, because I want to see some second round basketball. And I think that's why young, inexperienced teams need to do well in the regular season, because they have less margin for error when they have to learn some really hard lessons in the postseason.
Yeah, no, it's a very good point. And I mean, this is going to be some psycho stuff, especially on a day where the Cavs fall to 5th. But I got my eye on 2. Carter. Forget about 3.
I'm not going to get greedy.
Oh, no, I'm getting greedy. I believe in this team. I think the second half of the season is going to be a lot of fun, but hopefully there's fewer games like the one against Utah. We'll see how the Cavs finish off this road trip. We'll be podcasting after the Minnesota game, I guess, and then we'll be back home for a little bit. So we'll see how that goes. Big thanks to everyone that tuned in live on YouTube. If you want to support the podcast, you can like and subscribe. Click the notification bell so you know when we're going live. If you're listening via podcast, you can leave us a rating, leave a review, subscribe, unsubscribe, resubscribe, and help cook those books. If you want to be part of the Chase Down's exclusive Discord chat, send a screenshot of the review to chasedownpod@gmail.com. However you choose to support us, we really do appreciate it. Make sure you guys are staying safe out there. Until next time, go Cavs.